Well. A few days ago, I made a video about what's going on in Gaza. I actually made two videos last week about what's going on in the Gaza Strip. And I talked about how Hamas was calling on, first they called on the Arab nations to have a summit. That didn't go anywhere. There's no movement on that. Remember? And then they said that they were going to go down to Cairo to meet with the Board of Peace and make some demands. And my theory that I laid out in those videos is that Hamas is freaking out. And the reason they're freaking out is that Israel continues to destroy more and more of their infrastructure, continues to carry out strikes against their personnel, and continues to take more and more of the Gaza Strip and clean it out of Hamas because Hamas refuses to disarm. And the 20-point Gaza plan that Israel signed calls for Hamas to be disarmed before we can move on to the next phase of this whole thing, so that Israel was not sitting on its hands and was moving forward. And again, as I said, that Hamas was panicking, freaking out, and trying to figure out a way to survive. Now, there's also reports coming out of the Gaza Strip that Hamas operatives aren't even walking around showing their weapons in public because they're afraid of getting zapped from the air by the Israelis. So they're kind of on the run. We also talked about how there were some big protests against Hamas plan that Hamas then managed to suppress. But back to that idea where they were calling for an Arab summit, and they were saying that they were going to meet with the Board of Peace. And the question was, what move were they going to make next? Well, now we know what move they made next, and it's a very interesting move. I don't think it's going to work, but it's a clever move. It hit the headlines today amidst everything else going on with the funeral in Tehran and all that. But we're going to break down this story. So let's just pull it up and get right to it. Here's the headline today. Hamas dissolves Gaza government ahead of eventual transfer of power to technocrats. Wow, look at that. Hamas has decided, okay, we're done. We're dissolving the government. We're giving up power. We're going to give it over to the Board of Peace, to the technocrats, to the whatever it's called, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, the NCAG, that is now sitting in Cairo waiting to come in because no one's going to do anything until Hamas is disarmed. Well, let's take a look at how this story shook down. So here's what we're going to do in this video. We're going to look at a couple different Israeli reports of how this story was reported in Israeli media, because each report has some different information in it. We're going to take a look for funsies at how the French media was reporting it, because that's a good example of people who are choosing to turn a blind eye to what Hamas is up to. And then we'll talk about what this actually means going forward. So here we go. Let's hit it. Hamas dissolves Gaza government ahead of eventual transfer of power to technocrats. And what does it say here? The Hamas government in Gaza on Monday, that's today, announced the resignation of the so-called Emergency Committee, the Hamas-led administration that governs the Strip, in preparation for the transfer of authority to the Technocratic National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. The Hamas government said in its announcement that all civil servants will continue providing services as usual, describing them as public employees who are ready to work under the responsibility of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza. Hamas also said that it has completed all the administrative steps necessary to transfer authority. Quote, the head of the government's emergency committee, Mohammed al-Farah, has officially submitted his resignation, Ismail al-Tawabta, head of Hamas's government media office, told AFP. The NCAG, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, headed by the Palestinian technocrat Ali Shaath, was created by the Board of Peace that U.S. President Donald Trump established when he brokered the ceasefire between Hamas and Israel in October 2025. The move appears intended to demonstrate that the terror group is willing to hand over the administration of the Gaza Strip to the technocrats in line with Trump's 20-point plan for Gaza, despite its foot-dragging on the requirement for it to disarm. It also appears to mark a significant political shift by Hamas, which has run Gaza since it violently seized control from the rival Palestinian movement Fatah in 2007. This is nonsense. I'll get to that in a moment. The Board of Peace said it would assess developments in Gaza by actions, not promises, after the announcement. The board has, quote, taken note of Hamas's announcement, it said in a statement on X, adding that, quote, ultimately, our assessment will be guided by actions, not promises, to meet the critical needs of the people of Gaza. The board said it is looking forward to advancing the implementation mechanisms necessary to enable the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza to assume full governing authority, stressing that this will require the consolidation of all weapons under the control of the NCAG, as provided for in the Comprehensive Gaza Peace Plan and United States Security Council Resolution 2803. Now, United States Security Council Resolution 2803 is basically Trump's 20-point Gaza plan. They brought it to the UN. They made one minor change. It's a change that doesn't really matter for what we're talking about here. And then they voted on it. It's exactly the same. The change, the very slight change they made, is that it says in the UN Security Council resolution version that the International Stabilization Force will have a role in the disarming of Hamas, but it won't. Okay, they stuck that in there in the UN Security Council version. Hamas fears the mediators will declare. Here we go. A genuine transfer of authority must enable the NCAG to exercise its mandate independently, including taking the administrative and governance decisions entrusted to it, the board said. An Israeli official appeared to downplay the significance of the move, calling it spin without any meaning. Hamas fears that mediators will declare them to be violating the agreement, and therefore it's stalling and engaging in spin, the official told the Khan public broadcaster. A Palestinian source familiar with the matter told the Times of Israel that the move by Hamas is aimed at turning Hamas's existing governing structure into a caretaker framework while increasing pressure on the Board of Peace and Israel to allow the NCAG to enter Gaza. Last month, diplomats from each of the Middle Eastern mediating countries, Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey, told the Times of Israel that Hamas has sought to drag out negotiations on the issue of disarmament. They also argued that Israel's refusal to adhere to the terms of the first phase of the October 25 Gaza ceasefire has posed a major obstacle as well. That is false. Israel has adhered to it. They're always trying to pretend that the first phase is something other than it is. The main claim that they always make is that Israel is supposed to withdraw in the first phase, but it's very clear. And if you've been following my channel, you might know this by heart already. Here is the 20-point plan. It's very clear. Okay, the first 2 points are just kind of intro. The 20-point plan isn't 20 separate points, just like the 14-point memorandum with Iran isn't 14 separate action items. There's usually like the first couple and the last couple are kind of general. Sometimes there's some repetition. It really gets started at point 3, where it talks about the hostages being released, prisoners being released. That's points 3 and 4, and prisoner and cessation of hostilities, prisoners being released. That's 3, 4, and 5. And then Hamas members who commit to peaceful coexistence and to decommission their weapons will be given amnesty. Members of Hamas who wish to leave Gaza will be provided safe passage to receiving countries. In other words, Hamas's only option is to give up their weapons and leave, or give up their weapons and be willing to stay and be granted amnesty. Those are their options. And then it talks about aid, 7 and 8. And then it talks about a temporary transitional governance of a technocratic Palestinian committee. That's what we're talking about now. We're talking about this technocratic committee moving in, and that they'll be responsible for delivering the day-to-day running of public services and municipalities for the people of Gaza. They want to move to this clause. They want to bring the technocratic government in now and have them start running Gaza and say, look, we've agreed. The committee will be made up of qualified Palestinians and international experts, Board of Peace, Donald Trump. Very nice. That's what this thing says. And talks about how this body will call on the best international standards. Very nice. And then it talks about the economic plan to develop the place. And then all the way down here, 13, Hamas and other factions agree to not have any role in the governance of Gaza, directly, indirectly, or in any form. And I have to tell you, I read about a dozen different stories about this announcement today by Hamas. None of them mentioned this line. None of them mentioned this clause in the plan. It's like they don't even look it up and read it. Hamas agrees not to have any role in the governance of Gaza, directly or indirectly or in any form. All military terror and offensive infrastructure, including tunnels and weapons production facilities, will be destroyed and not rebuilt. There'll be a process of demilitarization. It'll include putting all weapons beyond use. Okay, this is what it says here. Now, all this is supposed to happen before Israel withdraws from the Gaza Strip. And then with Israel's withdrawal from the Gaza Strip comes all the way down here in point 16, and it talks about it withdrawing gradually as the International Stabilization Force moves in, and this is after Hamas is long gone. Okay, let's keep all that in mind as we continue to read. Okay, alongside the strikes across Gaza targeting terrorists, the Israel Defense Forces has slowly been pushing out the boundaries of the area inside the enclave under its control. Okay, and it's up to, and then it talks about what percentage, that it's up to 70% now. In the areas not controlled by Israel, Hamas has remained in place as the enclave's de facto government, where it is reported to be maintaining its control by executing its opponents and those it views as posing a threat to its rule. And look what it says here now. Hamas has taken a new step in that it will no longer be in charge of the Gaza Strip in order to remove any pretext for the occupation, which continues its aggression and war of extermination. Hamas spokesman Qassem Qassem told AFP, "We hope for a swift entry of the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, and Hamas affirms its readiness to hand over government responsibilities to the committee to ensure its success." They had already informed the other factions at a recent meeting in Cairo, and everyone's so happy about this decision. The first phase involved the release of the last Israeli hostages held by Hamas in exchange for Palestinian security prisoners held by Israel. The transition to the second phase, which was to involve Hamas's disarmament and a gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza, has been stalled for months. Now, this is just incorrect reporting. The second phase does not involve the Israeli withdrawal yet. The second phase involves the International Stabilization Force being formed, the technocratic government coming in, Israel remaining in place. Once Hamas is completely removed and the International Stabilization Force is in place, and then gradually Israel withdraws. Gradually. Should we read that line? What does it say here? Practically, the IDF will progressively hand over Gaza territory it occupies to the ISF, according to an agreement they will make with the transitional authority, not with Hamas. There is no transitional authority to make an agreement with yet. They haven't made that agreement until they are withdrawn completely from Gaza, save for a security perimeter presence that will remain in Gaza. Remain until Gaza is properly secure from any resurgent terror threat. They will progressively hand over the territory, meaning they're going to gradually withdraw as the ISF takes over. The ISF is not there to take over. Hamas is still armed and in place. Israel should not withdraw 1 millimeter. Under Trump's plan, Israel will only fully withdraw upon final verification that the terror groups in the Strip have disarmed. That's talking about the end of the withdrawal, even from the security zone. Meanwhile, Hamas is demanding the establishment of a Palestinian administration before it will consider handing over any part of its arsenal. The question of Gaza's post-war governance remains one of the main sticking points in negotiations in implementing Phase 2. Israel rejects any return of Hamas to power, but also rejects a direct takeover by the Ramallah-based Palestinian Authority, right? Which is also in the 20-point plan. The Palestinian Authority must undergo reforms. I think it even says that in here, that the Palestinian Authority has to go through some verifiable reforms in order to participate. Let me find that passage in here. Here it is. This body will set the framework and handle the funding for the redevelopment of Gaza until such time as the Palestinian Authority has completed its reform program, as outlined in various proposals, including President Trump's peace plan in 2020 and the Saudi-French proposal. Okay, in other words, they have to undergo these reforms, which they have not undergone. So, yeah, this always happens. Israel signs agreements, people interpret them however they want, and then Israel gets pressured to accept something less than was actually agreed to when they signed the agreement. Okay. And then for funsies, let's take a look at how the French are reporting this. They're obviously buying everything Hamas is selling. Hamas dissolves Gaza governing body, clearing way for technocratic committee. Hamas is preparing to dissolve the body that governed the Gaza Strip for nearly 2 decades. Wow, this is a bombshell. The move marks a significant political shift by the militant group. No, it does not. It doesn't mark a shift in anything. It's messaging. Here is what is happening. Hamas is terrified. Israel is like they lost their ceasefire, basically. Israel's carrying out airstrikes. The rest of the world is saying, we're not going to help you out, Hamas. We're not going to come to your aid. You have to disarm. We're not moving on. We're not going to build housing for people. We're not going to do anything until Hamas is disarmed. Israel, meanwhile, is taking more and more of the Gaza Strip, destroying more of Hamas's infrastructure, carrying out airstrikes, killing Hamas operatives. The people are getting restless. Hamas is starting to panic, and they're saying, wait a second. There's a way that we can slam on the brakes on all this, and we can cause the Israelis, we can switch the pressure around onto the Israelis to back off. Because you know what Westerners love? Westerners, the Americans, international, negotiators, they love signs of progress. I love that phrase. You hear it all the time. They're signs of progress. They love signs of progress. So this move by Hamas, making this empty announcement that they're going to give up control of the Gaza Strip, which basically is meaningless. They still control everything. They still have their weapons. They'll allow some technocrats in so that they can continue the dog and pony show that they've handed over authority to manage things like water and infrastructure that they don't really care about managing anyway. And the rest of the world can say, look, it's signs of progress. And then when Israel moves the border again or carries out more airstrikes or blows up more infrastructure, they can say, whoa, 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 Israel, calm down. We have signs of progress. There are signs of progress here. This move marks a significant political shift. Since a ceasefire took effect in Gaza last October between Hamas and Israel, the group has repeatedly said it is prepared to step aside from day-to-day governance. But the thorny issue of disarmament remains unresolved, meaning they're refusing. The movement has decided to dissolve the Gaza government. The dissolution of the Hamas body paves the way for the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, headed by the Palestinian official Ali Shah, to assume administrative responsibilities. Wow, this is wonderful. We're making progress, signs of progress. And then here in Israel on Ynet, Gaza handover or Hamas illusion. Israel calls the move spin to buy time. That's exactly what it is. The Hamas-run government media office in Gaza announced Monday that it's going to dissolve. Let's jump down about the Israeli officials being skeptical. Let's get rid of that. Hamas spokesman Hazem Qasem told Qatar's Al Jazeera network that the terror organization took another positive step today to remove Israel's excuses. See, they said the quiet part out loud. They took a step to remove Israel's excuses. The whole point is just to put pressure on Israel. He said the move was meant to advance the entry of the Technocrats Committee to administer the Strip, adding that the ball is now in the mediator's court. Qasem, that's the Hamas spokesman, also claimed that Hamas had fulfilled all of its commitments, including its willingness to transfer all Gaza government portfolios, including the security portfolio, and said the movement does not want to be part of the arrangements for managing the Strip after the fighting ends. Oh yeah, we're going to hand everything over. They agreed. Senior Israeli officials said the move was spin, adding, we already received indications from sources in Gaza yesterday that this would happen, but Palestinian officials told us this is only a symbolic step meant to create an appearance of progress for the mediators. According to officials, Mladenov, he's the head of the Board of Peace, the guy that Trump had appointed to run it, accused Hamas of blocking the entry of the Technocratic Committee. In practice, all the officials remain in their posts and Hamas continues to rule. From Hamas's perspective, the move is meant to allow the Technocratic Committee to enter under conditions that are convenient for Hamas. Hamas is essentially continuing to manage affairs behind the scenes. Okay, that is what is going on. And here in I-24 news from Israel, they also reported on this. Hamas impeding post-war Gaza governance plan, rejecting key disarmament terms. This is also from today. Hamas's recent announcement suggesting it's prepared to step aside does not represent a meaningful shift and continues to fall short of the conditions required for a post-war transition, according to multiple sources familiar with the negotiations. A diplomatic source involved with the Board of Peace told I-24 News that Hamas's declaration means nothing. It shows that Hamas is under pressure. They're cornered. They're saying the technocratic committee can come in, take over our bankrupt economy, our broken services, and all our problems, while we keep our weapons and keep power. According to the sources, Hamas has rejected the core provisions of the Board of Peace roadmap, including allowing access to weapons hidden in underground tunnels as part of a phased demilitarization process and transferring all weapons in Gaza to the exclusive authority of the technocratic government. In other words, they're not actually serious about it. They're not actually going to hand anything over. All they're trying to do is turn the pressure onto Israel. Don't believe Hamas will relinquish power in Gaza, Palestinians tell Post. Very interesting. Despite Hamas's stated willingness to hand over authority to a technocratic committee, the terrorist group will not relinquish power, according to Palestinians familiar with the matter. Hamas hasn't declared its end to the rule in the Gaza Strip, a senior Palestinian official in Ramallah, that's Palestinian Authority, told the Jerusalem Post on Monday. What they have done is announce the dissolution of what they call the Emergency Committee, but at the same time, they immediately declared that another temporary governing body would run the Gaza Strip and appointed someone to head it. So it's just a game. It's a dog and pony show. They say they want to hand over authority to the technocratic committee, but I believe this is only as part of the discussions in Cairo because they want to show that they're not the ones impeding the process. They want to turn the pressure onto Israel. They want Trump to say, oh, look, signs of progress. Hamas is actually agreeing to something. And then maybe they get some breathing room and there's pressure on Israel not to keep killing them and not to keep moving the lines and destroying their infrastructure. So it's not like I didn't predict this. All I did in my previous videos on the subject last week was say that Hamas is panicking and we're going to be watching this closely because they're trying to make some headway because Israel is choking them and closing in on them. Remember, those of you who saw that video we did, I think it was over a week ago, where we showed an interview with a commander in Gaza describing how Israel is choking out Hamas. So they're feeling the pressure, and this move is designed to ease up the pressure on them. That's all it is. It's not actual progress, and we have to hope that everyone, all the decision makers, don't buy the scam that Hamas is trying to pull over on us here. Okay, so that's the situation in Gaza. We'll keep following this. We'll keep watching it. I'll bring you more headlines as they come. God bless.